Good morning. Today we're going to talk about study design. Design of the study is how the study is going to be executed, which means what is the way, how are you going to plan the methodology and how you're going to plan the data analysis. Can you hear me now? Okay, so what is study design? Design is depending on what your question is. So that is how you're going to plan the study. So the design, in short, design is how the study is going to be structured. The structure of the study is important because only then will you be able to plan methodology, and you will also be able to plan on the data analysis, and you can actually do the methodology and data analysis. And depending on the study design, you're also going to decide what kind of sampling strategy you will undertake, and also the minimum sample size that is required in order to have power that is adequate for the study. Now, all of you at some time would have attempted to do sample size calculation on GPower or some other software, and it would have asked you what is the effect size that you are expecting, and so on. And it will also ask you what is the statistics that you're going to employ, and what is the design. So this is why design is most crucial to your study. So research starts with a question. Question will lead to objectives. The objectives will then you have to think about the feasibility, etc. And then you need to design the study. Hence, it is one of the most important parts of research. So design, depending on the type of the study that you have, depending on your research question or your objective, design will vary. Now, broadly, there are two designs. This is very broadly. That is, if the question is empirical, that is, if it is measurable, or if it has numbers and quantities attached to it, then it will be a quantitative design. This is what most of us are familiar with, where you do the t-test and ANOVA, and you're talking about significance alpha less than or equal to 0.05. That is at least 95%. You're sure that the results will be repeatable. So this is if the question is empirical. But if the question is non-measurable, then you do what is called qualitative design. So you have broadly two designs, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is undertaken mostly in social science research, psychological research, sociological research, social sciences, and also in culture and those kind of things, where the data that you get are not measurable. The data are feelings or words and so on and so forth. So that is called qualitative design. Now, why are we talking about this is because physiotherapy or rehabilitation research has a lot of qualitative aspects to it. Everything cannot be measured. That all of us know. So now broadly, what are the differences between or the comparison between qualitative and quantitative study design? Qualitative is used for exploration of experiences to give them meaning. So why do we do this is because if you have, for example, gender equality in our society, if you were going to look at it. Now you hear some people say, oh, I'm quite happy being a woman. Some people may say, I feel discriminated against. So in this scenario, for us to be able to draw themes or codify what is gender discrimination, you require to do a qualitative study, which means if I say I feel discriminated against, then the person is going to do an in-depth interview and find out what do you mean by discrimination. So I might say that I feel discriminated because um, because I'm not getting, I do the same work as my male colleagues, but I get less recognition, maybe something like that. So this is not necessarily measurable. Recognition, what is recognition? I'm saying I get less recognition than my male colleagues, but this is my perception, and this is something that is non-quantifiable, and other female colleagues may not feel that. Hence, it is qualitative or subjective. So now, why is this important for us in rehabilitation research? Is because it is relevant for us to understand the lived experiences of people with disability, cultural differences in the understanding of certain domains like exercise adherence or pain tolerance and so on, aspects that are not measurable. Now, we might be able to measure whether all of us, whether men and women are getting equal pay, but it is not, that is something that's measurable, but it is not possible for me to measure whether I feel discriminated against or not discriminated against. So that is that is what is that is one thing about qualitative research. Now, quantitative research, on the other hand, all of you are familiar with it. It is a systematic, formal, and objective approach to describe, test, and examine cause and effect relationship. So, if you are describing, then it becomes observational. Now, those things we will deal with in future classes. So, if you are simply describing, even then you have something that is measurable. So you're saying with exercise tolerance, you can control weight by 10% over a period of 3 months. So this is something that is measurable. And this is something that you can get repeatedly, time after time. If you have 25 subjects, 95% of them are showing this this kind of trend, and then if you repeat it in another population of 25 people, again you should be able to get that, because it is systematic, that you are controlling for a lot of things that we call confounders and so on. It is formal and it is objective, so you get numbers, you get graphs, you get tables and so on. So you get something that is measurable. Originally, quantitative research was used in basic science. That is, if you put, what we did in chemistry lab in +2. If you add so much HCl to such and such a salt, this is what will happen. So that is, it's quantitative. There is nothing that it is going to give you brick red color, or it is going to, the litmus paper is going to turn blue, whatever it is. So that is how it was originally used. But then, of course, it is quantitative is used in clinical research. We've already discussed this. And it is relevant definitely for rehabilitation research, because we need to understand aspects that are measurable, because we need to be able to generalize, because we cannot have a different treatment for each individual. You have to be able to generalize. Only then can we create evidence. And hence, both qualitative and quantitative are important in rehabilitation research. Now, what are the characteristics of qualitative research? Qualitative research is very difficult to understand, because we as rehab professionals in India do not have adequate grounding in the social sciences. We play lip service to sociology and psychology in the first year, and then we forget about it. So we don't have much basis in that, and hence qualitative sounds difficult. It is qualitative characteristics are, it is a soft science and it cannot be proved. It is something, it is based on feelings, it is based on interpretation, it is based on judgment, it is based on mutual understanding and so on. So it is a soft science, and you cannot say that it can be replicated. So if I have 4 patients who tell me that, 4 women who tell me that they feel discriminated against, it does not mean that if I repeat that same thing in another 4 people, that they're going to say the same thing. Hence, it is not something that is replicable, it's not something that can be proved. The focus in qualitative research is complex and it is very broad. Now, usually in quantitative research, you have a research question that's measurable, that is small, it is focused, and you're going to control for confounders. Here on the other hand, you're controlling for anything. So it is a complex thing. So you're asking, do you feel discriminated against? Yes, I do. So now, what do you mean by discrimination? That's the law. So it is a lot of law. It is very complex, where the focus may go off to something else. It is very broad. So one of the questions would be, how are you treated by able-bodied persons? So some people may say, oh, I'm treated equally. Others may say they're very, patronizing. So what is patronizing? So you need to go deeper into these kind of things. And qualitative is called honesty. You have broader questions. There is no narrow focus. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just trying to explore. You're trying to explore what they feel and how they react, how other people react, etc. It's very subjective, and it depends on the person who is responding to you. It is dialectic, which means it is investigating the truth. And it is done using inductive reasoning. So in quantitative research, when the research that we normally do, we are collecting data and then we are deducing. We are reducing the data, and then you are coming up with these numbers, which are called central tendency. From that, we are generalizing. Here, on the other hand, you are getting a lot of something, areas, vague definitions, from which, using inductive reasoning, you are bringing them into themes. From the themes, you will further take these words and put it into the baskets and so on. And qualitative research is a basis of knowing. It is a means and a discovery process, and it is not a generalizable or proving process. Qualitative studies are done in order to develop theory. So this is how you say that in third world countries or in the South Asian societies, women are not considered on par with men. How do they come up with this? Because they do these qualitative interviews, and then from there you get broader themes that women do the housework even if they're working outside the house. Women cannot have a say in how in major decisions concerning the family, so on and so forth. And from these kind of information, we're developing the theory that women do not have an equal place in society in South Asian countries. Then you have a shared interpretation. This is very important. The investigator and the respondent shares the interpretation. So because the respondent is going to say something, the investigator obviously has their own judgment, has their own background and their experiences. So how they proceed with the questioning depends on the investigator's background also. So the interpretation must be a shared one. With the respondent and the investigator must be able to maintain a non-biased stance. And it is based on communication and observation. It is based on how you can ask more questions, probe deeper into themes that are delivered, and observation of non-verbal communication. What are the gestures? What are the facial expressions that the respondent is giving, which can give you a clue as to how they feel. Now, the basic element of analysis in qualitative is words and non-verbal communication like gestures. Interpretation of qualitative research is based on the individual. So it is always necessary to have more than one individual who is interpreting, so that there is no so that the bias on the investigator side can be minimized. Because we are not trying to control for bias or anything. And qualitative research is unique. It is not generalizable by itself. It is unique, and it is only used for developing theory. The quantitative research characteristics are much more familiar to all of us and much more easier for us to understand. And quantitative is done through hard science. So this is where you're saying, if you exercise for 20 minutes, your metabolic rate, your metabolism will increase that, or you will lose so many calories, or you will sweat so much, or whatever. something that is measurable. Focus here is concise and it is narrow. So if you undertake a quantitative research methodology, your research question must be very focused. You can't say, how do people feel when they exercise? That would be a quantitative sort of question. Here you want to say, what are the physiological responses with exercising? That would be a broad question from which you would draw objectives. It is reductionistic in nature, in the sense that when we talk about, we have a large amount of data which you reduce into measures of central tendency, mean and standard deviation, median and interquartile range, etc. So that you can see trends or you can make meaning out of the large amount of data. It is very objective because they deal with numbers. You are saying out of 100 people, 75 people showed this. So we can say with confidence that 75% of the population will respond in such and such a manner. So it is objective. And reasoning is deductive. So you are deducing that from this data, this is not what should happen. Not inductive reasoning. It is top down. And it is not logical. And it is using mathematical logic. And the basis of learning is cause and effect and relationships. So why we do quantitative research is to see if we do ABC treatment, will X, Y, Z happen on PQR patients. So this is what you are looking at. Whereas in qualitative research, you're simply asking, what do you feel? What do you feel? What do you feel about this therapy? What kind of thing? And quantitative tests theory. So you have a theory based on sound reasoning and based on prior knowledge that if you do aerobic activity for this time, your cardiac muscle will become stronger. So this theory you're testing by doing quantitative research. That is that is how you will decide on the design. And you have more control in quantitative research because you have a narrow focus, and so you will try to do away with all extraneous inputs. And it very often uses instruments, and the basic analysis of basic element of analysis is numbers, whereas in qualitative it is words. And you can do statistical analysis in order to see mathematical relationships, and it is possible to generalize. So these are the differences between the two large groups of design, that is qualitative and quantitative. Now, under each of these, you have subdivisions, of course. There are multiple designs under each of these broad categories. Now, how do you do the research? Research methods involving qualitative requires in-depth interviews. So the samples will be very few. The normal number that you can employ will be between 5 and 11, and the full stop data collection is when data reaches saturation. Saturation means you interview one person. So you have more or less the same kind of questions to ask, but the questions are always open-ended. They give you some responses which you are recording. Then you do a second person, third person, fourth person, and then you analyze what you have got. So now if 1 and 2 have variations in their responses, 3 has fewer variations, and 4 has not said anything new. They have said exactly, the fourth person has said the same things that 1, 2 or 3 has said. Then you will take one more person, number 5, and if 5 also does not come up with any new themes, then you will stop your sample collection. So this is called data saturation, where you do not have any new concepts coming out from respondents. So this is how sample sizes sample sizes taken from quantitative research. So it requires in-depth interviews which can take hours at a time. And obviously, you need to record it because you need to listen to it over and over again in order to understand the words, understand the semantics. If possible, it should be videotaped so that you can analyze the gestures and the facial expressions, the non-verbal communication aspects, and so on. You require fewer people, but you have large amounts of data to be analyzed with nebulous boundaries. The boundaries are very vague because you don't know what you're looking for. because this is a exploratory kind of research. You don't have any preset notion on what you will find. So you have to listen to the entire all the interviews and then try to see what are the things that people are saying. Requires a lot of training in order to. The interview itself requires training, and analysis of qualitative data also requires training. Quantitative requires a strong research background. You need to know what kind of research design to take, how to do the sample calculation, how to do the sampling strategy in order to decrease bias. You also need to know if there are instruments involved, how to use them. You must be competent in using the instruments accurately. You must be able to do statistical analysis, stringent, appropriate statistical analysis, and you should have a strong theoretical background to interpret this analysis in light of theory and in light of what we need to know. But quantitative, on the whole, is slightly easier than qualitative for us because of the not very intensive social science background. Analysis of qualitative research is often wordy. Not often, it is always wordy, and it is non-definitive. For example, if you ask someone about the same thing, let's stick with gender discrimination. If you ask me, I might say something, depending on my education or depending on my experience, I might say I feel discriminated because when you have large meetings, women's opinions are very seldom taken into consideration. Maybe. Now, the same thing if you ask someone with another set of experiences. Let's say someone who's a housemaid. She might say that men doing the same work are getting paid better and they have more control, whereas she, because she is a woman and because she has children, etc., she needs to take abuse from the employer and so on. So the two samples that you have taken are giving vastly different interpretations. So diametrically different interpretations or opinions about what they consider to be gender discrimination. So it is very non-definitive. So what do you say? I mean, how do you come up? How do you stop? Where do you put an end? So this becomes problems. Points. The analysis will point to certain phenomena, but it does not prove anything conclusively. So the phenomena here, so you have multiple themes. So from this same information, you will have teams saying that when they are in managerial positions, they have got their opinions are set up in a policy. That would be one theme. That would be one basket. In which you would put all such opinions. Another one may be that they have less control or less ability to change their job because they have children dependent on them from the housemaid's perspective. So that might be, they feel confined. They feel that they don't have freedom to walk out of a job. So that might be another basket. Now, it does not mean that the executive person also does not have the same problem. They will also have the same problem. But it is not what they said first. That's all. So this is how the phenomena are identified. Very simplistically. It's a little bit more complicated than this. Quantitative analysis, on the other hand, aims to reduce large amount of data to manageable levels, and this is often done by software through mathematical modeling. And it is, and we are able to point to clear relationships and cause and effect most of the time. If you don't see clear relationships and cause and effect, it is either because your sample size is not adequate, or because your question was not appropriate, or because your what is that called? Investigation was not correct. Otherwise, if you have designed a study appropriately with the right tools, with the right sample size and the right question, then you will be able to find clear relationships and cause and effect. Alternately, it can also bring about logical hypothesis, which can be further studied to obtain empirical or hard information. This is what we will do in observational studies, where you are looking at, like the Framingham Heart Study, you're looking at what happens when you have multiple risk factors towards heart disease and how long the life expectancy will be or whatever. So there is, this brings about logical hypothesis. which later on you can study through other quantitative methodology. Now, interpretation. Interpretation of qualitative analysis requires in-depth knowledge of the phenomena and an ability to see broad pictures. So you require some amount of sociology and psychology in order to be able to interpret qualitative analysis adequately. If you are unaware of the lived experiences or the sociological factors affecting a population, you will not be able to interpret the information that they give through interviews. So you need to be able to see the forest rather than the trees. In quantitative, you also need to see forest rather than the trees, but the trees also become little important because there might be the individual data may be able to point to new hypotheses. Interpretation of quantitative analysis is based on known, measurable, theoretical constructs. So clear relationships are clearer, and it is done through statistical analysis. Basically, the interpretation becomes easier in quantitative because mathematical modeling can reduce the large amount of data into manageable chunks, from which it is easier for us to interpret. Rather, in qualitative, this doesn't happen. There are software to interpret, to analyze qualitative data also, but even there, you have to give the boundaries. So after you do the interview, after you listen to the interview, you have to set boundaries into the software so that it can take out the information. So it becomes much more difficult and vague. So when it comes to conclusion of qualitative methodology, there is no conclusion. Qualitative methodology is always inconclusive. It is an attempt to generate a hypothesis. It is to say that women, their gender inequality continues to persist in India, despite the fact that there is greater economic independence of women, despite the fact that more women are in managerial positions, etc. This much only. And then, so that is a hypothesis, and the reasons may be. The reasons may be widely held gender role expectations from the family, which women are unable to break through, or something like that. So you don't have any conclusion, but you may be able to generate a hypothesis which needs to be further elucidated. Quantitative methodology mostly has a conclusion. Rarely, quantitative also will not have conclusion. It will generate a hypothesis, but mostly it has a conclusion. Now, these are the broad differences between qualitative and quantitative study designs. Now, how do you decide which methodology, which design you want to choose? That depends obviously on the intention of the investigator. What is it that you want to find out? Do you want to find out psychosocial characteristics, culture-based characteristics, or do you want to find out some measurable trait? So that is the first reason. That is the first thing you have to think about when you decide your methodology. Then Then you want to know how is the question articulated. If the question is articulated as do people with stroke have greater difficulty going back to work? Then see there are measurable characteristics, there are immeasurable characteristics also, because going back to work is a choice. So that choice is a qualitative methodology. Maybe after I have a stroke, I don't feel like going to work. That is something that cannot be measured. They're not going back to work maybe because of physical characteristics, strength, range of motion, ability to walk. These are things that can be measured. So it depends on how the question is articulated. So if you have a question like this, you would have to take both qualitative and quantitative. But if it says, is gait velocity an important factor that can predict stroke survivors' return to work, then it would automatically become a quantitative study. If the question is, are societal factors responsible for return to work choices in a stroke survivor, then it will become a qualitative study. It also depends on the domains being studied. If the domains being studied are measurable domains with the strong instrumentation, then it will become quantitative. If it is a nebulous kind of domain with not very strong instrumentation, then it would become qualitative. And also the type of data you expect. Do you expect the data to be in numbers, or do you expect the data to be in words? If the data is expected to be in words, then there is a qualitative aspect to it. If your data is in numbers, then it is quantitative. This is very, very simplistic. It sometimes doesn't work so well. Now, to what we probably need to do in rehab research is mixed methods. Rehabilitation research, by the very fact of our definition of rehabilitation, involves both science as well as psychosocial elements. Therefore, it should involve both methodologies, and hence probably a mixed methods approach is often required to fully answer questions. This, most of us who have done research, we know. When we get some data or when we get some conclusion, we are not very happy with it, because we know that maybe this happened because of this, because of that. Maybe it happened because I didn't have money to come for therapy. There are so many other maybe. These ICF calls as contextual factors. So these contextual factors are always there at the back of our mind whenever we talk about any of our studies. This is where mixed methods comes into play. So empirical data is very often inadequate to capture all the important aspects of the research question, because we are looking at a lot of contextual factors also, especially in countries like India, where rehabilitation research is not even an entity that is recognized, not by the medical fraternity, but not even by the rehabilitation fraternity. So such a term does not even exist, and therefore it becomes inadequate for us to capture everything that we need to look at. So then very often the data that we get, the gate velocity that you get, is only meaningful within a very narrow frame or within a very narrow context. So if you are doing, if Mysore, for example, is a fairly accessible city, fairly accessible. So if we got gate velocity of stroke survivors in Mysore, it would not even be relevant to Bangalore. It would not, because there is traffic. Mysore is more of a retirement kind of city. So many areas are okay. But if you go to a crowded city, it would not be meaningful. Hence, many of the things, the gate velocity, whatever you are getting, may only be relevant within the context that it was collected in. So, while designing a study, contextual factors that may affect the results must be considered in their totality. What we have done traditionally is we keep them all as exclusion criteria. We will limit our samples, or we'll limit our participants to a very narrow context in order to generalize results, or in order to control for confounders. But what happens in this case is there is no generalizability. So I am saying I only took participants who were able to walk 50 meters without assistive device, who were motivated, who generally go outside of their home, who live in the ground, and who are below the age of 60. Now, the results I get out of this will only be relevant to those people, to similar subjects, and so the generalizability becomes questionable. This is probably one of the reasons that we don't have strong evidence in rehabilitation, because of our very stringent inclusion and exclusion criteria, because of the fact that we have not traditionally taken into context into context. We have not considered context. So therefore, when designing a study, we need to do this also. So what does it do? It may better be able to generalize, saying that even if they are living on the first floor, if the first floor is just one barrier, but otherwise their gate velocity is more or less the same. So what it can do is it can include more people. This is just a very broad example. Now another example, strength training in cerebral palsy. Does it alter with parent expectations, family beliefs, and so on? So this will become the strength training in CP, whether it is even giving you any body structure and function improvement, we have to do with quantitative methodology. Does it alter with parent expectations, family beliefs, will have to be done with qualitative methodology, qualitative design. So we want to know what might it affect. Does it affect adherence or does it affect also effort and motivation? So if parents expect the child to do better, I mean, be like their other siblings, the able-bodied siblings, maybe this child will put in more effort or maybe the child won't put in more effort because they feel pressure. We don't know that. So this question, strength training in CP, does it alter with parent expectations, family beliefs, and so on, would have to be taken up as a mixed methods design, because there is a quantitative aspect, which is whether strength training in CP has any effect at all. What is the adherence? Both of these are measurable. Why the poor adherence or why the greater adherence in a particular group of people will have to be done by qualitative methodology, and thus it becomes a mixed methods research. Likewise, if you were taking an example of quality of life of spinal cord injury survivors, what are the societal attitudes? Now, these societal attitudes may have something to do with beliefs about the cause. So, if they believe that it was because of his drunkenness, otherwise he would not have fallen from the tree, then the attitudes or the support that they may get from society may be less, in which case the quality of life may be decreased. So the quality of life may not be totally dependent on measurable characteristics like level of injury, accessibility to wheelchair, accessibility of the house, and so on. So these are some of the things where mixed methods will come into play. That is all on this session, and the next one will talk in greater detail about quantitative methodology. So, if you have any question, Nagarjuna, do you have any question? Okay, in that case, thank you, and we'll talk about qualitative research, types of qualitative research next Sunday. Thank you.